again, we are going to talk about the biological basis of behavior. And for this topic, we will talk about the human nervous system, particularly the brain and the other parts ng nervous system. So we follow this particular aspect of understanding the human nervous system. So you would readily see that yung complex combination of nerve cells, neurons, okay, that comprise billions of it sa buong body natin, they are categorized and organized into these labels. Now, take note, this is a way by which psychology tries to understand. When you look at them in the human body, they are not as organized nor as clearly defined. So, hindi mo yan, unlike a computer na may diagram, pag tinitingnan mo yan sa human body, hindi yan malinaw na kung ano yung what is in front of you, yan ba ay what type of the nervous. But medical students tend, okay, would be trained to identify and classify. So, isa sa mga uh, experience of having a subject like physiological psychology is to identify yung brain part, brain structure based dun sa actual na nakapin. Okay. So, we go by this system. So, merong central nervous system at saka peripheral nervous system. Now, a good way of understanding this would be to more or less identify na yung central nasa gitna. Okay, which is comprised of the brain and the spinal cord. While the peripheral nervous system is syempre nasa side. Okay, it's spread out into the different parts of the body, particularly the organs, the muscles, the skeletal systems, anything that would be controlled by the brain or would be sending information to the brain. So, two ways. A good example, halimbawa, yung pinakasakong natin, yung bottom of our feet, di ba? May mga nerve endings doon that tells your brain kung ano yung texture nung nilalakaran mo, di ba? It also provides information to your brain as far as your orientation or your balance. So if you're, it's crucial to our ability to move and to stand or stay still. Okay. Now, generally, we go by this classification and organization and distinction ng function. Okay. Uh, Different textbooks would actually have some variation in the terminologies given. So yung hindbrain, midbrain, forebrain is sometimes may variation in terms of how what is called depending on the textbook or reference that you're using. But more or less in general, when we talk of central nervous system, it talks of the brain and then yung spinal cord. Okay, the spinal cord, which is inside the spinal column. Yan yung pinaka-main. Now, the peripheral nervous system is where we place everything else. Now, we divide it likewise into two systems. You have the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system, which, of course, broken down further, yung autonomic nervous system, meron siyang sympathetic nervous system at parasympathetic nervous system. Now, we'll tackle the functions later on. Now, let's tackle the sympathetic and the parasympathetic system. Now, crucial siya in terms of understanding, especially in this time ng pandemic, because a lot of the anxiety, the panic symptoms, di ba? The anxiety symptoms and our reaction to stress, our reaction to fear, our reaction to conflict is explained a lot by this particular area of our brain. Magandang maintindihan to, especially in understanding self-care. Okay? Now, this part ng nervous system, as mentioned before, is autonomic. Ibig sabihin, it it functions without us choosing or let's say automatic. It functions by itself. It responds automatically. So, hindi mo kailangang isipin. Halimbawa, for your lungs to breathe, your heart to beat on a particular rhythm, or your stomach, for instance, to release acid, etc. So a lot of these things are good. It's really good that they're automatic because it will require a lot of energy on our part to think about those functions. Okay. So it's really good that they are automatic. Because imagine having to think about kung kailan magbibit yung heart mo or yung lungs mo o hihinga ka. So that is something uh, that is really, we are thankful na automatic sila. Hindi natin kailangan siyang isipin. Now, the other thing is that it allows us to respond to environment. So it is really crucial to survival that a lot of these systems are in place automatically responding to the condition of our environment. Yung fight or flight na sinasabi is a good example of this. When a person is in danger, when your brain perceives danger, it triggers several changes and actions or activated by the autonomic sympathetic nervous system so that your body is ready to fight or to run away. So it is crucial for survival, especially when you look at yung evolutionary history of humans, that we are always in a harsh environment. Hindi naman tayo nagkaroon ng environment na friendly. In fact, a lot of the things around us is there to kill us. So we need to survive. And there are many ways by which we survive. Primarily, our ability to fight, to destroy a threat, or to kill a threat, or to even run away from a threat, especially if we know we cannot overcome that threat. Now, the body changes are triggered by the autonomic sympathetic system by making our body optimally function for running, especially or for fighting. Halimbawa, yung muscles, they need more blood, they need more oxygen supply. And we do that by removing yung supply from areas na hindi natin kailangan for fighting. And the digestive system is one of those areas na kinukuhanan mo ng dugo. The other thing is that a lot of the peripheral nervous areas ng muscles, yung feeling na nanlalamig is literally because blood is less in terms of yung blood supply. Blood flow is less in those areas and they are drawn inner dun sa muscles area. So sa skin, they tend na manlalamig yan. So that is triggered by yung increasing heart rate at saka yung breathing becomes faster and shallow. So it creates and readies and prepares our body to fight and make use of the energy. Now, of course, that allows us to do a lot of things. In fact, if you recall yung mga incidents of emergencies, it allows a person to carry things that are heavy. Nabubuhat nila yung ref pag may sunog na ilalabas nila ng bahay pero hindi nila maibalik pagkatapos. Okay, so that's one. It allows us to fight, to be stronger. Okay, so it allows us also to run faster. So yung mga extraordinary conditions of human abilities were made possible by that. Pero of course, hindi kayang i-sustain yun ng matagal. Imagine a car or a body na in high gear for a long time, masusunog, mag-overheat. And that's the reason the other system takes over after a while. It takes care of reversing whatever the sympathetic nervous system has increased or inhibited. Kasi hindi naman automatic lahat inactivate niya. The sympathetic system, if you notice, will also lessen yung blood supply, lessen or inhibits yung digestive. Pagdating sa parasympathetic, ibabalik niya ulit yun, i-restore niya yon. Now, this is crucial when we try to understand our response to stress or anxiety. Most of the time, when you're tense, when you're in panic mode, it's your sympathetic active. So, how do you go back? How do you allow the parasympathetic system to activate? It's breathing. Breathing allows you to hasten or yeah, quicken your response or activation of the parasympathetic system. By itself, it will happen. Kasi pag pagod ka na talagang magre-rest. Kaya yung nararamdaman na pagod ka. That's actually your parasympathetic system working or yeah, asserting itself to work. So, kahit pilitin mong na alert ka pa rin ng matagal, it will be an impossible fight. Kaya yung mga nagpipilit na pipilitin mong gising ka pa or active ka pa or alert, yung nilalabanan yung antok, it's actually a non-winning battle. Better para talaga na itulog mo yan, allow the parasympathetic system to work for the simple reason na kailangan ng body natin yon. Our body needs to regain energy. It needs to heal whatever was damaged by the physical exertion, mga tissues. When you actually exert, your muscles can be damaged. Di ba? Yung nananakit, di ba? Nararamdaman nyo, yung na-exert na stretch. So it needs to be repaired. And at the same time, yung restoring yung dating functions ng other enzymes, hormones that were released during the emergency, they need to really be reset. Kasi yung prolonged exposure natin doon sa mga emergency chemicals ng body natin, they can be bad if we are exposed to it for a long time. Yung sinasabi nila mga cortisone, di ba? Even yung mga ganong bagay na yun, pag matagal ka naka-expose doon, it adds to the wear and tear of our organs and tissues. So, hindi rin talagang good thing na you are nasa high level ka ng energy for a long time. Okay. Okay. So the parasympathetic system has a lot of yung responsibility for maintaining the continuous functioning ng body natin. So importante yan. They go together. If you notice yung conditions na to, all of them would be suitable in terms of providing us with the ability to do more, especially in relation to survival. Yan. Okay. Next. Now, most of the time when we talk about studying the brain, we earlier we tried to do yung actual dissection, pero a lot of the brain research right now is in terms of yung imaging technology that allows us to study the brain at work. Kasi dati dinadissect. Now, let's go back. Let's go to understanding the brain, the main element, the main organ that allows us to survive, okay, in any form of danger. So, generally, you will hear that the brain is divided into two major hemispheres, the left and the right. Okay, hold them apart so clean and bright, pero just the same. Okay, even though they are separate, okay, they are connected by that bridge or tissue called the corpus callosum. So importante siya. And it's why do we know this? Because in studying in conditions of epilepsy, na realize nila that epileptic seizures tend to start from one hemisphere and crosses to the other erratically. So isa sa mga pwede natin sabing primitive solutions of curing epilepsy then and even now is to surgically cut that tissue ng corpus callosum. Doon nila na-realize and doon din nagkaroon ng realization that we somehow have separate functions or abilities ng left and right. Although that is very much contested now by recent findings on brain imaging and even yung mga additional. Although dominantly most textbooks on psychology and physiological psychology would say na merong separate functions yung right hemisphere at yung left hemisphere and they tend to be unique brains. In fact, nandun yung impression na meron tayong dalawang unique brain that are working together. Okay? And that is somehow even extended to the idea na yung pagiging right brain dominant or left brain dominant is manifested in terms of artistic ability or logical thinking, or even in terms of what is emphasized in our educational system. So may debate holding back in the sense that some new evidence suggests na hindi siya ganong ka-separate, but they are in fact a harmonious working together na hindi siya pwedeng mag-exist o mag-function lang ng isang side lang. Okay, that's the whole gist of that development. Okay, now when you look at the brain, they do seem to be very symmetrical, and that's also one of the evidence saying na mayroon tayong backup system existing in terms of those areas. And even people who suffered and recovered from stroke, a big portion of the recovery stems from the fact that the other hemisphere that is undamaged can take over, can relearn, okay, what was learned by yung previous hemisphere. Because there's evidence na when we store memories, may hindi lang siya one side. Okay, parang distributed siya. Hindi very clear really in terms of where in the brain those specific memories are kaya yung metaphor on comparing the brain with yung hard drive ng isang computer, may limitation. Hindi exactly the same way a hard drive would store memory, ganun din ang brain. May ibang way na we have not fully understand even with our current level of technology. But we know memory is equated with yung neural firing, and the patterns of neural firing is localized in areas of the brain. So, ibig sabihin, yung memory mo na visual, malamang nandun sa visual area ng brain, which when we try to understand yung localization, we tend to make use of yung geographic demarcation nito. So, again, ito ay uh, in terms of the way we study, they make it appear na parang malinaw yung demarcation do sa area ng brain. When in fact, when you look at yung brain, lalo na kung yan ay fresh brain, you would hardly see yung demarcation. Saan pa nagsisimula sa nagtatapos? Walang color demarcation. There's no color demarcation. So you cannot see. So you might be surprised pag nakakita kayo ng brain specimen na nasaan ba yung front, nasaan yung gitna. And again, medical students or even psychology students before, yun yung nahirapan talaga ako doon. Okay. Nahanapin. And remember, isa sa mga mahirap na subject yan before although in our college program wala. But isa sa mga mahirap yan na alamin. So if you're into medicine, one of these areas would probably be your na makukuha mo yun, that you have to deal with this. Okay. So we divide again by yung geographic, yung hindbrain, midbrain, forebrain. Okay, let's look at this in this particular slide. So uh, from top to bottom, the four yung nasa taas, mid yung gitna, and then the hind yung sa baba. In relation to the brain stem, yung pinaka nagko-connect sa spinal cord. Okay. Now, those areas of the brain, okay, are associated, and let's talk first do sa cerebrum, yung higher, yung forebrain, o yung pinaka cerebral cortex, yung higher brain na sinasabi. When we divide into these areas that you could see, na some functions tend to be localized into those areas, and that's something that is established a lot by medical research now. Like for instance, yung visual area is at the back part, back part ng brain, yung occipital. Then immediately next to it, you have yung parietal. Then you have on the side yung temporal lobe, which is associated with auditory and speech and language, while the front part ng brain, yung pinaka-frontal lobe, is associated with higher thinking, memory, and even personality. Now, there's a mix, okay? Even yung areas na ito are very general and hindi mo masabing very precise. Okay? But in studying yung mga accidents of people na nagkaroon ng stroke, nagkaroon ng brain damage, doon lang natin na-realize, yung na-damage na yun, hindi siya makasalita, hindi siya makakita ng color, hindi siya makarinig. They are now the basis of yung conclusion that these functions are generally localized in those areas. Okay. Primarily, yung mga nasa stroke, most of them have yung area na ito ng left side ng brain tend to be, kung ito yung nagkakaroon ng blood clotting o stroke, their ability to speak if yung Broca's area is damaged. So, nahihirapan silang magsalita. Even if yung vocal muscles are intact, they find it difficulty to pronounce. While yung vernix area, yung dito, makes it difficult for them, a person, understand, kung yun ang na-damage, to understand speech. And we're talking about speech na matagal mo nang ginagamit. It's understandable kung hindi mo alam yung foreign language, but if it's a language that you have been using since your childhood, biglang hindi mo siya maintindihan. Okay, then that means that was damaged. Now, the idea is to train the brain to relearn, to rewire, nasabi nilang ability sa rehab ng speech therapist at saka ng physical therapist, is to train the brain again to learn yung dating natutunan mo as you were growing. Okay, so yun yung development. Okay? So ito yung mga areas ng brain that we try to divide them and their functions. Okay? Now, generally speaking, vision is part ng occipital lobe, which is here at the back part, while temporal lobe is for auditory, which is yung nasa side near the ears, logically. Then you have yung frontal and parietal. They are responsible for movement and they are responsible for senses, the other senses. Although there are other areas that are processing sensory information. Okay. Now, yung limbic system, yung pinaka nasa gitna, this is also a big part ng autonomic nervous system because they are the ones processing that information, sensory information, and they are also processing environmental threat assessment. Kasi if you're in danger, what should you do? What will happen? So the amygdala and the hypothalamus are the ones very much active in those conditions. Okay. So yung thalamus, for instance, okay, part ng midbrain, okay, tends to process all forms of sensory information, auditory, visual. So, dun muna sa kanya dumadaan at ina-identify niya, ito ba ay visual? Oh, padala natin para ma-process ng occipital lobe. Ito ba ay auditory? Padala natin. So, it is yung parang uh, whatever, yung processing center to identify and then to remember. So memory and experience and perception of experience tends to begin with the thalamus. In fact, in threat assessment, okay, is very much a part ng system when the thalamus relays that interpreted information to the amygdala. When we are threatened, okay, your body, when yung emotional center natin, which is rooted in the amygdala, it responds in relation to whether there is danger. So emotion is actually part of our evolutionary response to protect ourselves, primarily anger. Ito yung area ng brain that would really transform a very calm and ano tawag ito, very tame na organism na biglang aggressive and dangerous. In fact, for animals na halimbawa na threatened, yung amygdala nila is very much active. So, in relation to being exposed to a lot of stress and danger, the amygdala is hyperactive. Kaya ang dali nating maging magalit, maging masungit when you're stressed. That is yung area ng brain na natin na very much active. In fact, when we are responding to an environmental condition with our emotions, it is our midbrain that is very much active. Yung sabi nilang amygdala hijack na nangyayari, na you respond automatically without thinking. And that is part of our evolutionary response. Okay? In fact, parang lumalabas when we are very emotional, it is our midbrain that is active while yung forebrain, yung higher brain natin, inactive. And brain imaging somehow supports that na yung sinasabi natin nagdidilim ang paningin, hindi na nakapag-isip is literally true because that area of the brain responsible for thinking is no longer active during those moments. Kaya nga sinasabi natin, how do we deal with anger? How do we deal with that emotion? Usually is to give a chance to our higher brain to function. And that's where sinasabi nila bakit may tinuturo lagi yung relaxation technique, breathing. Because that's the way, that's the only point where you can insert yung pause. In fact, pag hindi mo siya naabutan, it would be very difficult for a person to really control yung kanyang behavior. Kaya sinasabi nilang hindi na niya na-control ang sarili. Because that's a very brief moment na nagkakaroon ng window na kapag very active na si amygdala, hindi mo na siya mapigil. Kaya nga, part of emotional regulation that we try to teach ourselves in coping with our emotion is that bago pa lang umabot to sa kasukdulan ng emotion, ikakat mo na siya, ipopause mo na siya, you breathe. You try to distract yung cycle na magagalit ka. So you walk away, you bring, yung sasabi magbilang ka ng 10, huminga ka ng malalim. They are intended to cut that cycle wherein the amygdala will take over everything in terms of yung response. And that's also true with any form of emotion, whether that's fear, anger, or even happiness. Yung sobrang saya, delikado rin actually. Okay, so pag masyado kang tawa ng tawa o masyado kang masaya, you need to breathe also. Because definitely during those moments when you are emotionally high at your peak, any form of decision making is really impossible. Hindi ka makakapag-isip ng malinaw. So pag tuwan-tuwa ka, maaaring nasagot mo agad you make a lot of impulsive decisions, and that can be something that you will regret later on. Okay? So yon. That the amygdala and the hypothalamus are, they do work together. Okay. Uh, but mas crucial si amygdala when it comes to emotions. Now the hypothalamus is something that is triggered by the amygdala. Siya yung parang foreman kumbaga. Pag inutos ni amygdala, galit tayo, kailangan natin ng ganito. So a lot of those things are automatically controlled by the hypothalamus. A lot of the peripheral nervous system, yung mga somatic, yung mga sympathetic nervous system natin at saka yung parasympathetic are controlled, or ang starting point niya ay dun sa hypothalamus. Yung urge and drive, temperature, etc. A lot of those things. So, and these are the things that tend to really be affected also by being exposed to stress for a long period of time. Yung pagiging emotional ng matagal, yung pagkakaroon ng trauma, they tend to put your hypothalamus also in overdrive, or out of whack siya, or out of order siya, in the sense na nagiging erratic. So pansinin niyo, pag highly emotional ka, yung diet nyo, yung gana nyo, yung nawawala. Nandun din yung sleep, affected din siya because of that. So, because your brain is saying, alert tayo, danger to. So, hindi ka makatulog, hindi ka makakain, right? And that is easier interpreted nung panahon na malinaw na saan ang threat. But modern stressors are different from yung primitive threats natin no, na hindi malinaw sino ba kalaban mo, saan nanggagaling yung kinakatakutan mo. And that's precisely what happened with the pandemic, na hindi mo makita yung kalaban. So everything is a threat, or everyone is a source of danger, di ba? So naging hyper alert tayo, and that affected yung basic balance natin ng katawan. Because that's the role din ng hypothalamus, to maintain that balance. So the hypothalamus is essentially having a difficult time restoring the balance if your amygdala, or yung emotional part ng brain natin, is on a hyper mode. Di ba? Hindi, nahihirapan siya mag-active. So that's the reason why we would want to calm down that system by doing relaxation, meditation, and grounding, yung mga tinuturong techniques for self-care. So exercise, ganun din siya. Technically, walking, moving, they tend to help you restore back those balance so that your body can recover. Okay. Now, nakakatuwa dahil the hypothalamus is a very small, in relative to the other parts ng brain. It's a very small structure, pero it controls a lot of yung most of the other functions. Kasi kadugtong niya na it controls the major organs, major system like digestive system, and yung mga excretion system natin, yung yun. So they are all affected by that. So hindi siya, 'wag natin siyang maliitin, okay? The hypothalamus really work, uh, in controlling yung hormones kasi yun yung mga nare-release natin, and they are part of yung mga growth natin, or even yung the way we the way we function, kasi a lot of the times hindi lang naman neurons yung nagfa-function to make us work. Hormones are part of the system. Okay. So hormones, especially yung hypothalamus, controls the pituitary gland in the release of those hormones. So any form of erratic behavior ng hypothalamus can be uh, making yung mga hormonal imbalance possible. Yan. So si amygdala is very unique yung shape niya, at saka very unique yung function niya because yung way it is embedded sa gitna. There are some textbooks that refer to yung area ng midbrain as yung primitive brain or yung reptile brain. Kasi comparing yung evolutionary ng mga other creatures and organisms, we share certain structural similarities to the other organisms. So, doon mo mapapansin na of all the creatures, tayo yung mataas yung cortex. Mas maraming convolutions, mas maraming balubaluktot because that can contain more brain cells. Okay. Although bigger brain does not automatically mean mas intelligent. Oo, may sinend akong video that tries to argue na for a long time we tend to think na bigger brain cells mean more neurons means more intelligent. Pero if that is followed, then dapat mas intelligent yung mga whales and dolphins, and they're the ones studying psychology, hindi tayo. Parang ganon. But yun yung logic. But I think that is something that should be we think about. Kasi sadly rin, okay, that is the same argument being used by uh sadly by yung mga discriminations done to other as part ng long history ng psychology. Naging part siya ng issue wherein we think na supposedly yung mga European Western sila, they have bigger brains, and yung mga maliliit na pygmies or Indians or natives, we tend to assume na mas intellectually mahina sila dahil supposed to they're smaller. Hindi yun totoo. Okay, in terms of intelligence, it's no more than yung size ng brain. Okay, in fact, sinasabi nila intelligence is a relative concept, dahil sinasabi niya intelligent dahil marunong ka mag-math, marunong ka magsabasa. But no, that same PhD student, padala mo sa bundok, hindi yan magso-survive as compared yung mga indigenous na nandoon. They know how to survive as opposed to, so ano yung, di ba? So it's the word intelligence that we as we tend to use it is also relative to that. Okay. So ito yung amygdala, and then the hippocampus. Now the hippocampus is this other structure in the midbrain that is very much related to the creation of new, or the storing of new memories. Ito yung responsible for processing what we have learned, what we have talked about, and for you to remember that the day after or the next week is because sa hippocampus siya pinrocess. In fact, pag hindi siya active, yung if you know yung 51st dates, the following day parang everything is new. Okay? So doon crucial si hippocampus in you. And this is where also sleep is related, dahil yung functioning ng hippocampus is very much related to the time that we are able to sleep, and yung length of time. Hindi lang yung hours, pero yung time of day. Okay? Because the hippocampus is one of those areas of the brain observed to be functioning only during that particular time ng ating body rhythm, ng body calendar, body clock. So hindi siya dahil natulog ka ng at any other time, pero at a certain time importante siya. Okay. So our ability to remember, our ability to comprehend is in this area. So ito na yung si thalamus, and then this one. This area near the brainstem is important for survival and consciousness, siguro, yung sleep. This area itong area na to near the brainstem is very much related to consciousness. In fact, 'pag ikaw ay naka-comatose, usually ang natitira na lang nilang area na tinitingnan if it's still active is this area. Okay, may pag in fact yung sinasabi nilang brain dead, technically may area pa rin dahil kung humihinga pa yan, may heartbeat pa yan, gumagana pa yan. Okay, yun kaya nga yung definition of what is a brain dead individual, it's, debatable pa rin siya. Kasi literally, it takes a while before totally wala ng activity yung brain. So, puwedeng gumagalaw pa yung heart, pero yung brain may ano, wala ng activity. So, the definition of when is a person considered dead is something that is connected dun sa understanding nito. Now, the cerebellum is one area na very interesting, lalo na sa mga diniscuss natin sa neuron and in terms of yung alcohol. Kasi the cerebellum is an area that stores, okay, memories of coordinated movements. So, ibig sabihin, pag may natutunan tayong bagong skill, yung coordination like dance step or any skill, basketball or any sport, sa cerebellum siya stored. Now, the reason it is understood in this way, so imagine mo, pag yung nalasing ang isang tao, ba't hindi siya makalakad? Ba't hindi niya makagawa yung balancing act? Pero nakakalakad siya. Because the other areas ng brain na controlling motor areas ay meron pa. Yan. Pero yung remembering yung dating coordinated movement, this is the one affected. So pag yun ang tinamaan with your intoxication ng alcohol, yun yung difficulty na kaya siya ginagawang test for alcohol, excessive alcohol use ng mga driver. Yung may bibilang ka, yung naglalakad ka nanto. Definitely, if you're uh, under the influence ng alcohol, itong area ng brain na to, ang unang natatamaan. So this is something that that we need to understand. And ganun din yung medalas for sleep and ano. So a lot of these areas of the brain are continuously being studied. Okay, hindi naman sila uh, hindi pa natatapos ang understanding natin about this. And so it's important to keep ourselves checking on yung latest development on this field ng psychology, lalo na't ang our ability for imaging technology is improving. Okay? And perhaps we might be able to really understand more kung nasaan yung consciousness, because that's one of the things na hindi natin alam. We don't even know anong amount ng brain ang dapat active para masabi mong conscious ang isang tao. That is still an answer. So again, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching this, and I hope you continue to study and ask questions in relation to this area of our study.